Okay, you're going. Yes, right. I think the other fellow should set up.
Testing, testing, testing. How do I sound? Good? Can you hear me? No? No? A little louder? How's that? Is that good? Good, good, good? Test, test, test.
By faith we understand that what is seen is not made of. So the whole message is about faith. Without faith it is easy to involve in God. But those first two verses.
Okay, guys, let's get started because we got a lot of material to cover today. Oh, baby.
Yeah, it's already.
All right. If you haven't got the book, you got some catching up to do. So go get the book. Buy one for your friends and family too.
Yes.
Show them how smart you are.
Christmas present.
Secondly, if you have not done this yet, you should. You need to join our group because this is how I'm going to communicate. Oh, look at that. I can make it bigger. Would you look at that? Okay. So make sure in this group, if you can't figure it out or you're how you're tech illiterate or you're tech challenged or whatever, please talk to me or Tyler. See, Tyler's here today too. Tyler's my crutch today because I have some very intense stuff to talk about with philosophy today, and Tyler is a philosophizer of sorts. So Skip will also keep me in line. So he's also a philosophizer. So yeah, exactly. He specializes in skipology. So okay. So let's start off with prayer. Let's do that, and then we'll get going. God, we thank you for the beautiful snow today. Even though it makes for somewhat perilous travels, we are grateful just for the beauty of the snow and to be reminded that because of your Son, we are washed as white as that stuff that's outside right now, which is pretty amazing. Or white as coconut if you're from down in the South Pacific. So, God, we pray that you can open our minds to an extra expanse today, and that you can help me to be clear, help me to be humble, and help just your Son to speak through your Spirit here today so that we can fully understand how to best engage the world today, especially as we even go into this identity series. So we can be better equipped on how to sit with the brokenness of the world, create a space so that people can hear your word and come to the knowledge of your Son and truly experience you, God, and come to the faith and all that good stuff. God, we love you. We need you. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen. All right. Remember, there's a purpose to all this. Okay. All right. Raise your hand if you were just like dumbfounded on this chapter. Don't be shy. Yeah, there's some quick ones.
Dumb is the key word there.
Dumb is the key word.
If you read the same paragraph.
Oh, I know. It's a rough one. So yeah, so chapter 2 and chapter 3 are absolute just killers. But if you don't understand it, just read through it, okay? Because it will come to a climax, and then the rest of the chapters will make sense. He has to do that groundwork to get to his argument. And it's a rough go. It's a rough go. So I'm going to do a few things here today. We're going to take a step back kind of, and because some of you might be like, well, because I have a professor he really has helped me think, because I'm like, just tell me the practical. I need to know the pragmatic answer because I got to do something about it. And he called me out one day. He's like, Chuck, you are like so many good evangelicals. You always want the pragmatic. He's like, but we have to do the work to understand why we believe what we believe so that we can then take that step. So be careful not to just jump to the so what, and then what do I do about it? Remember even our mission statement, like know, live, advance the gospel. So we got to know it first before we can start advancing and living. We often want to just jump ahead and be like, just tell me what to do, just tell me what to do. And so I fall in that same camp where I'm just like, what's the point? What's the point? So there is a point. There is a point. But we have to do some of that dirty work to get there. It's sort of like you got to learn how to crawl before you can learn how to walk. You got to learn how to stand and take steps before you can walk. And so we have to do all that work. So this is know hour, not live hour or advance hour, right? So it is going to be a little rougher. And it's okay if you get a little lost. I mean, I get a little lost in some of the readings that I have to do. And that's okay. Stretching our brains, our concepts, our ideas, our constructs in the world we live in is actually really healthy. It's good. So hang in there. On the on the flip side of the coin, I am going to give you guys a little bit of carrot today here so you can figure out where we're going. So here's some little quotes from New Begin that might be helpful. Just so you guys understand, there is a telos, there is a trajectory, a purpose to what we're doing. Here's kind of his summary, if you will. Liberalism at its, because remember we talked about liberalism versus fundamentalism, right? Okay, so he goes, liberalism at its best is marked by an open mind which is humble and ready to learn. Amen? That's good, okay? Fundamentalism at its best is marked by a moral courage which holds fast to the truth even when it is assailed by counterclaims from without it. Okay, they both have their strengths. We talked about their weaknesses a lot last week. We have to understand that they do have strengths, okay? So, now we get into the philosophers. You guys ready? Because that's what he's talking about in this chapter. So let's back up for a second. This is very simplified, but that's okay. Simple is good sometimes. And Tyler, please just cut me off if I'm wrong, because I'm like deathly afraid I'm going to get one of these philosophers wrong. So, okay, so Plato, who's this guy? Okay, Plato emphasized concepts that had a universal form, right? That there's an ideal form, that there's a perfection out there, right? Okay, so that's kind of his thing. He has an idealistic philosophy, if you will. Okay, Aristotle, who was a student under Plato, right? He took it. He was like, no, there's more to it. He taught that universal forms are not necessarily attached to each object or concept. In other words, that you can't find there isn't necessarily a universal idealistic form in this computer. Right? You have to like ask questions to determine what makes this computer tick. How does it work? So we got to ask the questions. We got to take it apart. We got to look at it. We got to take a multimeter to find out where the circuits are and how it all works. Right? You have to analyze it to then figure out what on earth is going on underneath. Okay. So that's Aristotle. Okay. So. Fast forward. Okay, we're going to do this is a rough one because we're going to skip like 1,000 years or 1,500 years almost. Okay, so the Eastern Church ran with Aristotle. Islam ran with Aristotle. If you don't know much about the history of Islam, the numbers that we use are Arabic numbers. Before that, we had Roman numerals, which try and do calculus with Roman numerals. Ain't gonna happen. They also didn't have a concept of zero, which is a problem, so on and so forth. Okay, so Islam was much better at thinking and how to develop scientific thought, astronomy, that kind of stuff, because they ran with Aristotle's train of thought, which was fine, and so did the Eastern Church. The Western Church, the Latin Church, they were more Platonic. A lot of that came from Augustine, which that's a whole other story. And once again, I'm very, very much simplifying here, okay? Fast forward to much, much later, and you get this guy, Thomas Aquinas. And he was the influence of Islamic thought, Eastern thought, started to encroach in Europe, and then they were like, wait a minute. So now we got to start asking questions. And this, if you will, was sort of the seeds that led to enlightenment, okay? So Thomas Aquinas kind of taught that there was a compatibility between reason and faith. So in other words, Aristotle and Plato, they can get along, it's okay? He also came with the concept of natural law, which is a whole nother world, and we're not going to talk about that. but you've probably heard that tossed around. In fact, it's in the founding documents of the United States, this ethereal concept of natural law. He also taught that the virtues, that there are virtues, like virtues that can really set up, let me put my notifications on off there. Okay, so that virtues are a path towards understanding God and leading this virtuous life. So if you can attain to the virtues, then you can become a better person. Okay, so this is kind of Thomas Aquinas in a nutshell. But the big thing was that he thought there was a compatibility between reason and faith, and Lesslie Newbigin talked a little bit about that. And now we are going to talk about what that means, the history of philosophy, if you will, according to Lesslie Newbigin. So, I'm going to literally walk through the chapter here, because otherwise we're going to get lost here. So, okay, so here's a quote. So page 18, you guys can follow along, because, well, like I said, we're just going to literally go through it today. Because, like I said, if we understand these basics, look at this, guys. Look at that. If we can understand some of these basics, then we can understand where Newbigin's going with his arguments and how we ended up thinking the way that we do, okay? As a society, as a culture. We weren't just plopped here on Earth at this moment with no previous thought or history, remember? I hope you guys learned that from church history. So, okay, so page 18, right in the middle there, he talks about the Thomist scheme. And the big quote I think that's really key is he says, certainty is a matter of knowledge, not of faith. This is Thomas Aquinas tried to separate the two. So he was like, okay, no, you can be certain about knowledge, like, I don't know, gravity, which I guess Isaac Newton really talked about later, so maybe I'm jumping the gun here. But so, you can, water, runs downhill. The birds chirp in the morning, whatever. You can, this is knowledge. These are things you can be certain about. But faith, you can't be certain about. And so there was this divide, if you will, in Thomist thinking. Does that make sense? Okay. And then page 19, right in the middle, he says, the philosophical proofs for the existence of God must be invulnerable, according to Thomism. But then Newbigin says, but they are not. And so this leads to a whole mess of thinking and how thought around philosophy, certainty, how they've all gotten kind of mixed up. So then we turn to page 20. We're going to go a little fast here because then I'm going to camp out on a few spots here. He asks the question at the very top, is there any escape from skepticism? Right? Because if you can't have a philosophical proof for everything, and there's no clear definition between what you should have faith in and what you could be certain in, then you should just be skeptical about everything, because you can't really know anything. And so, is there any escape from skepticism? This was not primarily a matter of belief in God, but of whether or not any reliable knowledge whatsoever was possible. Right? So this is what the thought was coming out of this. Okay, so this is the milieu of philosophical thought in, say, France, Western Europe. People were being run by Thomist thinking, but then being highly confused about what to believe now. Can I be certain about my belief in God? But he said certainty is about knowledge, not about faith. So then what should I have faith in? And how do I know, what about things that are weird and I'm not sure about, like love, or a commitment to my spouse, or whether the sun's going to rise? How can I be certain about anything anymore? So along comes Descartes, René Descartes. And if you guys remember Vincent Bacon, when he came, he talked a little bit about this, which I think was helpful. So this repetition is probably good to get it instilled in our mind. So Descartes, if you were in France in the 16th century, they would get together and they would just debate, and they talk about the latest philosophical thoughts. That's actually where the coffee houses were kind of invented, was to go and talk about nerd stuff, and they would try and stump each other on their philosophy. And so Descartes kind of in this world, and he's like, okay, I got to come up with some good arguments, and he does. And then this Cardinal Pierre de Broglie. I don't speak French very well, so somebody help me out. He's like, hey, Descartes, you're cool. Why don't you figure out how we can defeat skepticism and defeat atheism? And Descartes' like, no problem, got this. And so he sits around and thinks and hurts his brain. And he's trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm only trying to skip ahead here. So he's trying to figure out how you can lay a foundation that is both self-justifying and self-authenticating. Think about those words right there, just alone. So once again, we're already seeing the seeds of kind of individual or self-discovery, things like that. Okay? Right in the middle of the page, thus skepticism is made to serve the cause of knowledge, for one's skepticism is evidence of one's existence as a thinking and doubting subject. This is where Descartes arrived, and then he came up with his famous mantra, which is, I think, therefore I am. Okay, so then he brings this forward as a concept of the only thing I can really know is what I know because I think it, and therefore I can the one thing I can't be skeptical about is my own thoughts. Which I don't know about. I'm skeptical of my own thoughts, so I don't know what, he must have been much smarter than me. So, actually I guarantee you he was smarter than me. So, okay, go down to the bottom of page 21. This is 21. This is kind of the key if we go looking backwards of the chapter. Newbegin says, he was thus reversing the method of Augustine. Doubt, not faith, was the path to knowledge. So it's the title of the chapter, Doubt as a Way to Certainty. If I doubt my way enough down the road, then I will be certain about something. And then of course his certainty was, I think, therefore I am, which doesn't really tell you much. But then of course this opens up a whole way of thinking. So what Descartes' methods did was it really reinforced, and Newbegin talks about this, the dualism between mind and matter. That somehow our physical being is somehow divorced from our brain and our thinking. And we still live in that world, right? We still think that. We even look at the way that they separate colleges and universities, right? You have, oh, those are the fine arts kids. I'm in engineering. I use my brain. They use their feelings, right? I mean, we're very divorced from like that way of thinking, right? So that's, and this is know hour, not feel hour, right? I mean, so you see how this is still very common and evident in our world today. So that's what is going on here. So because if you strongly reinforce the mind separate from matter, then you're also, well, okay, I'm not going to go there yet. Okay. Additionally, what Descartes added to was this polarization between objectivity and subjectivity. Okay? Subjectivity is the way we view the world from our own view. Objectivity is the way that we can view from the outside. Now, can anybody be perfectly objective? Anybody?
No.
No? Okay, so in a way we're kind of always, except for Tyler. Tyler is perfectly objective in everything he does. So unless you're a robot, and even then the robot is programmed by a human, which means there's subjective inputs. So robots are the best at being objective, but even then they have, we've seen this. Have you guys ever seen the movie Social Dilemma on Netflix? Anybody seen that? Nobody, 2 people, 3 people. No, but you guys have not seen Social Dilemma? Watch Social Dilemma. Social Dilemma is a documentary. Okay, did anybody see Don't Look Up? Okay. So, okay. Yeah, Don't Look Up. Okay, so not Up. Don't Look Up. Yeah. Okay, so Don't Look Up is sort of the, okay, Don't Look Up is the kind of the satire of society, which, and very, very true. Social Dilemma is the documentary form of what was going on underneath it, okay? They go through, they interview the psychologists who helped develop the algorithms that fed the social media machine that we have today. And the one line that just gets me every time was the psychologist that worked for Pinterest. He said, we're trying to get as deep down into your brain stem as possible so that when you click or make that purchase or whatever else, it is coming from your animalistic instinct as opposed to your prefrontal cortex. I mean, we want you to just be fed. So watch that movie. It's really, really interesting. Anyways, we are whole beings. Are we totally lost yet? Yes. Okay, Skip? Yeah.
Well, one thing that I don't think was mentioned in there, and I might because I was reading other paragraphs over and over, but with some of the duality, the liberalism versus fundamentalism, the perfect robot versus the perfect feeler person, you know, those would all go back to what Descartes had with Cartesian coordinates. If you took the fundamentalism and put it on the x-axis and the y, nobody's way up here 100% fundamentalist, and nobody's way over here on the liberal spectrum. We're all kind of plotted in the middle in there. We've got a little bit of these tendencies, a little bit of the science, a little bit of the faith, and almost everything that he's talking about is on the extremes, and we're all caught over here on his
Yep. Well, and that's true. What's funny is I think a lot of these guys would have acknowledged that. But once again, it's what has it become known as. And Newbigin goes into Kant, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and how he was kind of pulled out of his own thinking too and put in a little box. So that's just kind of, that's what if anything, that's what we need to understand, is that, well, look at what we're doing. We're reading a really difficult chapter, right? It's much easier to be like, forget it. Just tell me what to do. Like, well, but now we're putting things in a box. And that's what the world tries to do, is put things in a box, because then we can kick the box if we don't like it, and then open the box and snuggle the things we do like. But we need to be aware that not everything is in a box and think on that spectrum. Yeah, so yes.
It's a lot easier for us, tens of years, hundreds of years later, to look back and look at things and analyze things. So when I think about the church at that time, thinking about the things that everyone was proposing, and society thinking about the things that everyone was proposing, they're in it, and it's fresh to them, and they're really wrestling with it. And I think we really have a killer advantage over that by being many centuries later, being able to look back and look back at all the church history too, and having that class before this one is really cool, because then it really helps us put all the pieces together.
Yeah. Well, and I remember Timothy Jones talks about this in his book. He's like, the further away from we get it from history, the clearer it becomes. And so, that is true. We're inherently blurry right now in our seeing, because we're in the middle of it. But it is helpful to look backwards and realize that, like, they were wrestling back then too. So if we think that we've somehow arrived, we're probably a bunch of idiots. Like, so because we have not arrived, we still wrestle with the same stuff, just in a different way. Yeah.
Now this cardinal commissions Descartes to basically disprove the skepticism and atheism. To me, from what is saying he thinks, it doesn't sound like he did. Did he feel like he accomplished that, or?
Yeah, so I'm not a Descartes expert. I don't know if the cardinal would have been like, great job. But I'll tell you one thing is that looking back, they would definitely have been like, he failed, because it led to significantly more skepticism and polarization in thinking, which Newbigin alludes to later. But that may have happened whether Descartes had come up with his premise or not. So,
I think
yes,
when I was studying about it, both sides used Descartes. I mean, like, it's almost like he had several components at A, B, C, and D. E, so the people that believed in doubt, skepticism, atheism took the points and did never read the conclusion. And I think that's part of the problem with his philosophy, is not everybody follows it all the way through.
And that's correct. Nobody ever followed all the way through. That kind of goes back to Penny's comment too, is that, yeah, we don't sit in that tension. Yeah, Sherry.
I noticed within my students, I think all of this is like thousands of years ago, so what does it matter?
Yeah, totally.
But I see this within my students,
Mm.
that I was taught as a child, God thought. And therefore, this is what I'm, you know what I mean? This is the path, my life from a very young age, before I even knew the Lord. It was, the church was centered. Our students don't feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
They are centered. I think, therefore I am.
Mm-hmm.
And they doubt. And so they look up, they research their own self and find their own truth on social media, on whatever. And the things that we see as solid, they do not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think some of this gender identity stuff is.
Yeah,
You have this chromosome, that chromosome, you must be this. And they're like, I think.
that's true. So you're jumping the gun a little bit, but that's okay. So
But
let's
it's- I mean, reading this, I'm just like, this is a bunch of bunk. Who cares? But then I start feeling it,
Uh-huh.
and I feel it in my students.
Oh, totally. Okay, so this is good though. Okay, so but that even came from somewhere. Okay, so if you go back to mid 20th century, we still were informed by these kinds of philosophical thinkings. They were a bit more collectivist than they are now. But those ideas were, in the 20th century, were especially like turn of the 20th century. The term that was thrown out was fin de siècle, like the turn of the century, is, hey, we can better society through our nation states and everything will be better. And then what happened? World War I, World War II. I mean, like just destruction. Like it was the deadliest. There are more people who died in the 20th century than all of humanity of all time ever before. So it was awful. So then people coming out of the World War II, this is the reason why the hippie movement and everything happened, was people were like, yeah, that whole collectivist thing, like nation state, that didn't work out so great. Like communism, Cold War, like this is stupid, well, this is not working well. So let's see if we can explore this more by looking to other religions, looking within, maybe we can discover something. And then that also had a pendulum swing. And so we just keep going back and forth, but it just changes a little bit. So I think, and once again, I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but this does lead into our identity talk that we're going to talk about. This didn't come from nowhere, and it was very much informed by us. We, in some ways, our culture fed into that way of thinking. So one thing I do want to be careful, and I'm not saying anybody is doing this, but we have to be careful not to be like us and them. Like, man, those kids over there, they don't know, there's a cesspool over there at that high school, it's terrible. Like, no, we're just as much at fault because like something about the way that we as a culture raised those children led to their way of thinking. And so that's why we got to learn how to sit in that weird tension place. So I saw another hand. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was just going to kind of comment on Descartes a little bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What Descartes was doing was more of a epistemological exercise to show that I'm not being deceived by an evil genius or whatever. He goes through all this in the meditation.
Yep.
So the point is, because I think, I know that something is certain, and that I exist.
Yeah.
And then he works up from there. So it's a little bit, I mean, the way it's presented here, maybe it's not really what he was trying to do necessarily. It's just that
Correct.
it's used here to sort of illustrate his kind of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also like Newbigin doesn't go into where fundamentalism was founded upon. He's starting with the way fundamentalism was viewed in today's world. And same deal. He's going through the way Descartes has come to be known as opposed to what he was actually known in. Yep. So okay, let's stop for a second. Let's go into this. So, okay, page 23. He talks about the consequences. So let's see. He talks about consequence number two. Oh yeah, consequence number two was so the consequence number one was dualism of mind and matter. Consequence number two was the dualism between, or the polarization of objectivity and subjectivity. Right, and then he goes into the top of 23. Science has replaced religion. That's what Huxley said. And this myth, of course, is still powerful today. it's like this book could have been written today. I mean, this is from 1995. This book is old now. 1995 was a long time ago for those of you that maybe have forgotten. So, and then the third effect was to reinforce this dichotomy between theory and practice. Okay, this feeds into scientific method. Okay, so and then here, go down to the sort of bottom of the page. The centerpiece of Descartes' method is the critical principle. Every truth claim must be open to criticism. Now, this is probably, I imagine, the spot where you guys gave up, and like as you're reading through the book, and was like, I'm lost now. Okay, so we're going to go through this. So, yes, you're right about Descartes, but we're going to go through kind of how his thinking has led to what we have. Okay, so he would say, I believe in P. Okay, P is something like, I believe that anchovies on pizza is the best. Okay? And then you would counter with,
No, when was that?
well, use the terminology.
You are.
Because
So I believe P.
I doubt it.
You doubt it. You doubt P. And why do you doubt P?
Because of QR and T.
Okay, and what is QR and T for you guys?
Pineapple, all of it.
Pineapple,
Pineapple is better.
Pepperoni,
pepperoni,
sausage.
okay, and sausage. Okay, so I believe in P, but these three doubt in P because they believe in Q, R, and T. So therefore, Q, R, and T should nix P because this is more believable. Would you guys agree that pineapple, pepperoni, and sausage is more believable than anchovies as a pizza topping?
Yes.
Okay, so, but do you see how this kind of dichotomy of thinking doesn't really help? Because this form of doubt, so if you doubt P because you believe in Q, R, and T, then this presupposes faith that nobody else doubts Q, R, and T. Because who doubts pineapple on pizza? Does anybody see? So there you go. Now Q's been canceled. Okay, so now you already presuppose faith that Q, R, and T are better, and therefore it cancels out P. But in fact, P actually might be right the whole time. And then you guys are all wrong. And actually, anchovies are correct.
No, but right for that person, but not.
Well, so now you're jumping the gun. But yeah, you're right. So that does lead to that. That does lead to the my truth kind of nonsense you hear nowadays. It's not, and I say nonsense not because I'm not trying to be insulting. It's not philosophically sound. Okay? So, we're jumping the gun. So, okay, so that's a Cartesian method. Okay, so you also may say, well, I doubt P because you have not proved it. Okay? Somebody might say that?
It's a scientist.
Okay? But, and then he says, okay, so I have not proved that the anchovies are the best. How can I prove that anchovies are the best?
You can.
I can't. I could shove anchovies down your throats all day long, but I can't necessarily make you believe that it's the best. Therefore, how can I prove something that maybe isn't provable? And I'm using a subjective example very purposely, okay? Because I'm not using like, I don't know, that hydrogen has one electron, that's like, those are things that are provable, okay? So then he says in top of 24, I cannot offer this form of agnostic doubt unless I offered on the basis of a set of beliefs about the validity of these criteria, which, for the moment, I do not doubt. So in other words, like, you have to have faith in something that you believe, even if everybody else doubts it, but then maybe you have faith in their doubt, and their doubt, see what I'm saying? Like, it's circular. It doesn't work, okay? Okay, so then, go to number 3. So then, of course, so option 1 is you can believe in something, and then you can prove it or not prove it based on your other beliefs. Option 2 is you can believe in something by proving it, which you may or may not be able to do. Option 3 is total skepticism. And then he says the only logical implication of total skepticism would be suicide. Because if everything's skeptical, then what's even the point of living, right? And that's unfortunately where people do turn. So then we go down to the bottom of page 24. One does not learn anything except by believing something. And conversely, if one doubts everything, one learns nothing. On the other hand, believing everything uncritically is the road to disaster. The faculty of doubt is essential. But as I've argued, rational doubt always rests on faith and not vice versa. Rational doubt depends on faith. Rational faith does not depend on doubt. Okay, so does that make sense? Is anybody totally lost on that part? Doubting is absolutely essential to our, not just faith, but the world we live in. Right? We can doubt or believe any number of things. Okay? And these are good things. So I want this to really be clear. Okay? The opposite of faith is not certainty. Or sorry, the opposite of faith is not doubt. Okay? The opposite of faith might be certainty depending on your view of philosophy. But the point is that faith is absolutely predicated on both our understanding and proof of things, but also in our doubt, all at the same time. Have I totally lost everybody? Please raise your hand if you're completely lost.
Well,
Yeah.
Chuck, I'm probably jumping ahead, but I'm saying, so what?
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, so what does this have to do with me today? Talking to my neighbors about Jesus.
okay, I'll come back to that. Yeah.
Doubt is a journey.
Mhm.
And I think it's a journey that makes us stronger.
Yep.
You know, as we go through it, and some people have to live through that journey.
It's true. Doubt is a journey. Yeah, skip.
Well, I'm going to jump backwards on this because
Okay.
I think we went past one of the things that Plato said about the good and the being of something.
Okay.
It's only good if it's being what it's doing. This is a pretty good coffee cup, but it's a pretty bad argument.
Right.
Okay.
But if it suddenly started springing a leak, then it would no longer be ideal.
It wouldn't be, but right now, it's a good coffee cup.
It's a good
doing
cup.
what I want it to do.
Yeah.
Anchovies, in my opinion, are probably bad on pizza, but they're really good in Caesar salad dressing.
Sure.
My faith in Christ is going to save my life, but when I leave here this afternoon and the roads are bad and I'm like, Jesus, take the wheel, Jesus is probably not really good at driving my car home for me without my influence. I have to have faith in the right things. If Plato says if you're putting the wrong thing in the wrong place, it's not going to be good because its being is not being satisfied.
Correct. Jesus, believe it or not, has no experience in driving vehicles. So he's probably not a good idea at driving.
That's not what the song says.
Yeah, I know, right? Jesus, take the wheel. Yeah. Okay, so Trish, I might come back, I might not, because we're going to do a bunch of work today to get to the so what. And the so what really is going to be these 4 sessions on identity. So buckle up. Okay, we got a crank here. Let's keep going. Okay, now we arrived to Immanuel Kant. Okay, if you guys remember Vincent Bacon's talk, the phenomena and the noumena, right? These are the things that you can know and the things you cannot know. He said that ultimate reality is unknowable. Okay? You guys remember him talking about this? Vincent Bacon? Okay. Or maybe you weren't there. Well, sorry, you missed out. But here's a new beginning comeback. How does one know that something is unknowable? Right? How can you know that you can't know something? Doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this is the critique on Kant. However, let's go to page 26. This is really interesting because he does take the time to go back to what Kant really stood for. The very beginning, with let's see here. He says Kant's positive affirmations about the being of God rest primarily on the sense of the absolute character of the moral law. So he's starting with the moral law, or the Bible, if you will. Okay. But the development of modernity since the Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason as the only path to reliable knowledge, and this is because of Cartesian kind of polarization, has weakened the sense of a moral absolute. Because if you, and this leads into Kant, okay? So if ultimate reality is unknowable, then an ultimate truth, i.e. a moral absolute, also is unknowable, therefore you can't actually have one. Because if you can't know it, then you can't have it. Okay, so then he goes, Kant was the product of a devout Christian home where the commandments of God were the basis of moral law. His argument from the fact of moral obligation to the existence of God, however, has not been followed in succeeding generations. In other words, this is the part that's been lost about Kant. Rather, the reasoning has been that since there is no God, there is no moral law. So that's how Kant has come to be known, is that because of reasoning, we can determine that there is no God, and if there's no God, then there is no moral law, because we can't know those things, and we can't reasonably critique it, therefore it doesn't exist. Therefore, the only thing we can know is the things right here. We can know gravity, we can know the construct of an atom, we can know that when you put cesium in water it explodes. We can know certain things, okay? But we can't know unknowable things. So this is the problem that we ended up with Kant. So then we arrive to good old Friedrich Nietzsche. Okay? So Nietzsche was actually, okay, he always gets a bad rap, but this guy was actually really stinging smart. So he looks at Descartes, he looks at Immanuel Kant, and he goes, now hold on a second, both of these guys are kind of missing the point. He's like, if the critical principle is exalted to the supreme place in the enterprise of knowing, then the possibility of knowing anything is destroyed. And he's right. If you believe in pure Cartesian thought or pure Kantian thought, then you can't know anything, and therefore what's the point? This is why everybody thinks he's just a nihilist, okay? But what his determination was that true and false, right and wrong, these are now words which have no objective reference. They are simply expressions of the will. We will things into existence. The will to power is the real driving force of history. So we will things into existence so that we can have power over them and have control over them, or people, okay? So he says, instead, let's see. I'm running out of time here, so I'm trying to figure out what to do now. So here, the 20th century has learned this lesson, right? Because we kill each other. Claims to speak meaningfully about right and wrong are discounted. Instead, one speaks of values. These values are a matter of personal choice. So values are a Nietzsche term. It came out of Nietzsche. Like that we will these things into existence because if I think, therefore I am. And if we can't know, then can we know? Well, we don't know anything, so we just will things into existence. And that's something we can at least trust, is this thing that we have created, and those are my values, and that's what I hold to, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. You guys see where all this comes from? Like, it's not illogical that people have come to this conclusion, these ways of thinking. So we can't immediately just dismiss people and say, well, that's dumb. Well, no, it's not dumb. It's actually incredibly smart. They just haven't thought all the way through the process. Does that make sense? So if anything, we just got to help people in their thinking as opposed to just simply tell them whether they're right or wrong. Right or wrong is not the question. I mean, it is the question, but right or wrong is not going to help anybody. Just telling them that they're wrong and giving them a bunch of arguments why they're wrong. Because what does that do for anybody? It makes them defensive. It makes them go, well, you're an idiot. Like, you're a jerk. Like, thanks for considering me as a person. Right? We are story beings. We are narrative beings. We want to create community, a world around each other through the stories that we tell about one another and within and among one another. And so if our stories are, you're wrong, I'm right, get in line, that story is going to mess up the whole process. And it probably does not align with Christ. So we're going to skip. I'm going to come right back to it because I'm going to move ahead here. So, okay, so we're going to page 27, towards the bottom. He says, it is deeply ironic that this method, in other words, all these ways of thinking have led us here. It is deeply ironic that this method has led us directly into the profound skepticism of the modern world. In other words, in our desire to know, Descartes wanted to know, Kant wanted to know, even Nietzsche wanted to know. Instead, what have we arrived at? skepticism about everything. And he does a short mention of Michael Foucault. This guy is fascinating. He's very, very interesting. He talks about how education and societal power can inform or construct societal patterns. Somebody else to read on your own time. He's really, really interesting. He just recently died, so he's really interesting. So
that's why he's really interested in PQRT.
Yeah.
He's interesting because he died.
I know, I was circular there. You like that? Okay, so I hope I lost you guys all. Yeah, Dwayne, did you have a thought?
According to Scripture, we're accountable for the mess we're in. Romans 1:18, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. But since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So the reason that we got off track in what you're describing is because we didn't respond to the revelation that we were given according to this, and therefore without excuse. So what we're analyzing here is the way we messed up, the way we got off track, and we're totally accountable for that. It's perhaps understandable as sinful people, but it's not excusable.
Yes, I agree. So a couple things. We're assuming that we were ever on track. We have never been on track. Well, since Adam and Eve screwed up. So I do want that to be really clear, because that is the mantra here in culture. We got off track. Back in the good old days, in the 1950s, we had everything straightened out. No, we did not. We created the atom bomb.
Yeah, and I don't think this says that.
No, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Okay, secondly, I agree with you that we are accountable, but that doesn't mean that just morally pontificating is going to help anybody. Like just standing up here being like, well, that's wrong and this is right, so get in line, is going to help anybody. So my hope and goal, and once again, we're only in chapter 2, so I'm not like, we have not arrived yet either in the book. No, okay, is we're taking baby steps. Remember What About Bob? Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Baby steps, okay. We're taking baby steps, and there is a purpose to all that we're doing here, okay? And it is going to equip us so that we can be prepared to answer. That's a scriptural concept, and have a proper confidence, so that when we approach errors in faith understanding, we can help people think through it and then come to a deeper understanding of faith. And this is New Begin's thing. Okay, there are classically two options if you're going to be polarized. You can be liberal and be like, we don't know anything, we're skeptical of everything, so let's just test everything and then not really know anything. Or the fundamentalist stance, which is, I'm going to beat that Bible into your head and you're going to get in line whether you like it or not. And so we want to find, if you will, a middle ground and where we can approach people with helping them think through their thinking. Like, hey, your idea of, your truth is predicated on all these philosophical thoughts and the milieu that you live in, and therefore it didn't come out of nowhere, and so let me help you think through this. So I'm gonna cut you guys all off because I have some other points here. So I am gonna get to some so what. Here we go. You ready, Trish? Okay.
I'm ready.
John 20, verse 29. This is Thomas doubting, right? He always gets a bad rap, but whatever. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed me. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Faith, as Newbigin observes, is ultimately the courage to confidently affirm beliefs which let me start over. The courage to confidently affirm beliefs which can be doubted. I mean, that sounds really backwards, but it's totally true. Faith is the courage to confidently affirm the beliefs which can be doubted. In fact, at some point, every human being is probably going to doubt their faith. And that is a very normal thing. I actually get really concerned with people who say they've never doubted anything. I go, well, you've not really thought about anything then, or you've never engaged with people, or you've never lived outside of your house. Doubt is very normal and natural, a part of faith, and you can see it right here. Thomas got a bad rap because we're like, he should have just believed, but he doubted, and then he went and evangelized India. So I probably would have done the same thing if I were Thomas. So let's read another one. This is one of my favorite passages. So this is where the boy is having seizures because he's demonically possessed, and his dad's like, Jesus, if you can, heal him. And Jesus is like, if you can? Really? Really? I am Jesus. Hello? And then immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. See, if you're a dualist, you'd be like, well, that's ridiculous. He just said he believes, so how can he unbelieve? That doesn't make any sense. No, it makes perfect sense. He does believe, but at the same time he's doubting. Because he's had his son having seizures his whole life, throwing himself in the fire and all this crazy stuff. And he's like, how is it going to just suddenly change, Jesus? I have a really hard time believing that. And so Jesus confronts him, and he's like, you know what, I do believe, but I just have trouble overcoming my doubt. Please help me through this. So the distinguishing mark of Christian faith isn't the absence of doubt, but the object of trust. Okay? And that's your sneak preview to our identity talk. Okay? Faith isn't the absence of doubt, but the object of trust. Okay? Cool. I have 2 minutes in, and then any other questions?
About next week, it seems to me like the 5th and the 12th and the 5th and the 12th are mainly for the parents and stuff.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up.
Is this going to be a continuation, or are we going to skip the 5th and go into the next one, or what? I don't understand.
Okay, good question. Okay, so first of all, registration is open for everybody. You guys can all register now for the 5th, okay? Families got their first dibs, so now you guys can register now for it. You have to register to come tomorrow, or next week, okay? And the 12th, okay? So please register. We are not going to continue chapter 3 next week. Next week, Tyler's going to speak. I'm not actually even going to be here next week, but Tyler's going to talk in our first of 4 about identity. Then on the, what's the date? I'm going to mess up the dates here. The 19th, we're going to come back together and do chapter 3. So you have lots of time to read chapter 3. And then, so that will hopefully give us some runway to then keep going. So chapter 3 on the 19th, we're going to cover chapter 3 on the 19th, cover chapter 4 on the 26th, then we're going to kick into part 3 of the identity. Okay? And then so on. Does that make sense? So we're going to kind of do this at the same time, kind of parallel, if you will. So you have 3 weeks to read chapter 3 now, which is great. But hopefully some of these, this is why we're doing this hard, dirty work, is it'll help us to sit in understanding the thought about identity and where that even came from. And then once again, even the identity thing is going to be chunked out. Okay? Actually, here, I'll pull this up so you guys get a sneak preview. Bear with me here. So, okay. So we're going to do, of the 4 parts, identity in the self, identity in the church, identity in the family, and then identity in the culture. So we're going to cover all 4 of those. So the 5th and 12th of February is self and church, and then in March we're going to pick up and do family and culture. And then once again, alongside doing this property confidence stuff will equip us and give us a better understanding of how we sit in and amongst that. So we're kind of doing these things in parallel. Does that make sense? Yeah? This is good. You guys' brains are going to get worked out this next few months. It's good. It's a good thing. I think I've personally seen it. I've seen a lot of fruit come from this doing this hard work. I have some very anecdotal stories of people who have now been able to sit with people who have really weird thoughts or confusion about their life or where they came from, where they're going, and congregants here at the Bridge being able to sit better with that tension and help them along through it, or even how to engage with some of the very broken kids in the basement. Like, how do we engage with that? And this is, I think, equipping all of us for that. And I think it's going to have massive fruit in helping more and more people come to Jesus. So, yes, really quick.
Tim Keller has a great illustration, I think, that reinforces what you're saying. He gives the illustration of an engineer that finds a boulder that's fallen down on the road, and the one approach is to lay a bunch of dynamite on top of it, and then you have
Blow
big
the smithereens.
explosion and dust and everything, and nothing happens. But the more successful approach is to drill a deep hole in it, and get down into it and understand it, and fill it full of dynamite and blow it up. And he uses that illustration to say that the preaching to people, hitting them with truth is equivalent to laying the dynamite on top of the rock, and it just creates a bunch of dust. Whereas if you drill down into understanding where they're coming from, then when you blow up their worldview, it's effective.
Yep, exactly. If you guys want some interesting video to watch later, look up Cannon Beach, Oregon. I think this was in the late 70s. There was a whale that got beached, and their solution was to blow it up, and it didn't work so well. And it was on the news, and it's hilarious. You should watch it. It's kind of a classic video, but just look up Oregon beach blowing up whale or something like that, or exploding whale or something like that. So, okay guys, it's after 10. We're gonna cut it. Those of you that are volunteering, head on down. I gotta head out down there too. Once again, please, if you would like to help serve the church in whatever way, even in simple ways, like making coffee in the morning, please let me know. I'd love to get you guys on the rotation. We have lots of needs as our church grows, and I would love if you guys could serve in those really, really special ways. So, cool. Love you guys. Thanks for hanging in there. We'll talk some more. All right. Don't give up. Don't give up, okay?
Come back. What is that one thing I always say? Always come back.
Yeah.